Attaching well-known names to any project can create high expectations, and that's sadly the case for FuRyu's new action RPG, Reynatis, with contributions from composer Yoko Shimomura and scenario writer Kazushige Nojima. It's easy to see why there was buzz around this release. And just for good measure, we add in the game's clear inspiration from Final Fantasy Versus 13 and the director's love for Tetsuya Nomura's work. There's even a collaboration with The World Ends With You, which led to excitement upon the game's initial announcement. Still, with FuRyu's mixed track record, I was cautiously optimistic, and it turns out that caution was warranted.
ドミヌスは魔力の管理にマリンを解放してくれるだろう。
解放って？
それはマリン次第だよ。考えておくといい。
そりゃいるよな。知ってた。
Reynatis is set in a world much like our own, but with the existence of wizards and magic. However, these magic users are oppressed, with organizations constantly trying to control or exploit their powers. The most prominent force in Shibuya, where the story unfolds, is the MEA, a police force that recruits wizards to battle those who remain unaffiliated. Opposing them is the Guild, another organization that stands in contrast to the MEA. Then there are stray wizards who try to live normal lives while hiding their abilities. Adding to the chaos is a drug known as Rubrum, which gives people magical powers, but the trade-off is you get addicted to it pretty quickly and then you turn into a monster. In the midst of this, we meet the main character, Marin, who doesn't belong to any of these groups. His only goal is pretty simple, to become the most powerful wizard and achieve true freedom, but his path isn't as clear-cut as he hoped. Marin soon finds himself entangled in the ongoing conflict between the MEA and the Guilds, the hidden history of magic, and a group of outcasts known as Owl. At the same time, Sari Nishijima, a high-ranking MEA officer, is determined to put an end to the Rubrum problem. When their paths cross, everything begins to shift. Despite being framed as a dual protagonist story between Marin and Sari, Marin is the true focus. The game's story is filled with intrigue, but it quickly becomes clear that there are too many elements packed into this runtime. With only around 15 hours needed to complete the game, including side quests, the plot feels rather rushed and underdeveloped. Important events come and go without leaving much of an impact, making the story feel more like a draft than a polished narrative. While the story falls short, the character interactions provide some charm. Conversations between the cast, often through in-game text messages, offer more depth to the characters than the main plot does. These optional exchanges, where players can take on perspectives of different characters, give insight into their personalities and add a layer of realism. It's unfortunate that many of these moments are optional, as they could have done wonders to flesh out the story if integrated more naturally. The game's side quests are a mixed bag. Some provide additional backstory for the characters or highlight the darker aspects of the world, particularly with how Rubrum affects ordinary people. However, many quests are quick and actually forgettable, not adding much to the overall experience. In terms of gameplay, Reynatis offers a mix of combat and town exploration. The combat is generally enjoyable, with smooth controls and the ability to switch between party members on the fly, allowing for some interesting strategies. Each character has a distinct playstyle, and the combat revolves around two modes, suppression and liberation. In suppression mode, you can only dodge an enemy attack, while in liberation mode, you can fight back once your gauge is full. This system adds a bit of tension to battles, especially in larger fights where enemies can come from all sides.
切り裂け白金の閃光
Despite the promise of a unique combat system, it's far too forgiving. The difficulty is mainly due to the number of enemies rather than the design, which can feel pretty lazy. The combat doesn't pick up later in the game either, but it's never challenging enough to truly engage players. On top of that, the game's leveling system is overly generous, and there's little enemy variety. Still, the combat is very entertaining. As for the wizards, they have special equipment that you can upgrade that adds some customization to the overall experience. Town exploration involves a mechanic where wizards must hide their magic to avoid detection by the MEA. If you choose to reveal your magic, civilians will report you, and eventually elite officers will come after you. While this sounds like an interesting concept, it doesn't work as well as it could. Fast traveling to another location immediately resets any alert level, making the consequence of being caught particularly non-existent. This could have been a great way to build tension, but it ultimately feels pointless. One of the game's biggest weaknesses is its repetitive dungeon design. While Shibuya seemed to get all the love as it's impressively recreated, the dungeons are a little more than copy-pasted hallways. There's very little to distinguish one from the other, which quickly becomes tedious. Even though combat is meant to be the focus, the lack of variety in these areas drags the game down. Reynatis also includes a brief collaboration with Neo The World Ends With You. Unfortunately, this crossover is pretty underwhelming, with the short scenario that feels a little more like fan service. While it's fun to see characters from Neo appear, the collaboration doesn't really add anything meaningful to the overall game. Reynatis has the potential to be a great action RPG, but it's held back by a rushed story and unpolished gameplay. The game's world is intriguing and the characters are likable, but the experience feels incomplete. The combat system, while fun, never fully realizes its potential, and the repetitive environments make the game feel like a slog at times. At the very least, the music is excellent, and the character interactions are a highlight. If Reynatis is ever to get a sequel, there's a solid foundation to build on, but as it stands, it's hard to recommend. It's a game with really big ideas, but it doesn't quite manage to pull them off. Noisy Pixel is giving Reynatis a 5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.